fresh air to me. I love this. I saw Moloko do this at Glastonbury in 2000. That's how old I am. How do I? Oh, there we go. All right, our participants have started to arrive.
Hello, hello.
Welcome everybody to Positively Charged 7. Steph's just going to do some karaoke for us.
10 points if you know the artist and the name of this song. Write it in the chat. You might get a free bottle of Avallen.
I'm giving away Avallen now.
Oh yeah, I do for a good bunny ears. We play it at home. It's when we host people, we play bunny ears. You interrupt the song only if you know the name and the artist.
You know the name of the lead singer of the band, though.
What do you get for that?
Maybe a case?
Free LifeCycle Analysis. I reckon it's worth a little bit more than a bottle of Avallen.
So yeah, so just wait another few minutes. Got a nice bunch of people.
Hello, hello. Who have we got? Who do we know?
No, say hello, everyone. If you've logged on, pop your name in your chat. Tell us who you are and where you're from.
Hi there,
a few friends.
Maduro. We got some more Netherlands representation. Mr. Ryan Hill in Singapore. Hey, hey. Hiya, Gareth. How's Leeds? Hey, RBP. Okay. Right. I think that's about a good time to kick off. What do you say, Tim? Timothy Noel Etherington-Judge.
Oh, please don't use my full name.
Oh, I love to use your full name.
Makes me sound ridiculous. Makes me sound like I went to some sort of stupidly posh school.
Didn't you go to school with the lead singer from Queen or something? Oh, no, the drama.
I'm not that old. I went to the same school as he did, but thank you very much. Yes.
Apologies. Right, well, listen, everybody, welcome, hello, and hello. This is Positively Charged 7, titled Why We Must Be More. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Stephanie Jordan. I am the co-founder of Avallen and the founder of Drinking Out Loud. More importantly, I am your host for today's Positively Charged. Now, let's get straight into this one, as actually we do not have a minute to waste in our fight against the global climate crisis. Now, did you know that we have less than 9 years to cut our global greenhouse gas emissions in half if we are to keep the impact of climate change to a manageable level? Now, this is according to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. 9 years is really not so far away, and the speed at which we must act has never been so urgent. Hence the song of today, as Moloko famously sang, "The time is now." And I say all this in a light-hearted tone. The reality is that we are in an absolute time of crisis, not to mention the pandemic and many, many other difficult and complicated things happening around the globe. I'm half Colombian and I've been pretty close to the situation currently, and you know, it can be heartbreaking. At the end of the day, though, we've got to try and keep a vision and a mindset that the picture is much, much greater than our individual country and or continental challenges. And that can be really, really hard. But I think it's so important that we all consider our actions and that we are able to lead by example. And above all, we really, really must try to be positive. And sometimes that might be as simple as just putting one foot in front of each other. Many of you here may already know Timothy Noel Etherington-Judge, my brother in arms. But as Tim says, how do you run a marathon, Tim?
One foot after the other.
One foot after the other, which is why today is our 7th installment of our Positively Charged series, but actually only our first of 2021, because as I say, sometimes it can be hard, but you've just got to keep going, one foot in front of each other. And today's session is very much about that. It is about our belief to why we must be more. And this is actually a sequel to a recently published report that we did called the Be More Report. I say we, that is Avallen. Ultimately, we have a vision and mission to become the world's planet positive drinks brand. And so by publishing this report, we wanted to bring to life a kind of roadmap to how we believe we'll be able to achieve that. Now, I just want to remind everyone again watching that this Positively Charged is a free resource for our community being the drinks industry. Now, if it inspires above and beyond that, fantastic. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is take a long look into a brighter, exciting, and sustainable future. And that is always thanks to a very enthusiastic expert panel, which we do handpick for each edition. And let me tell you, we have one hell of a lineup today. We will be talking about basically those that are taking direct action to combat the drinks industry's emissions, and basically discussing what drinks brands can do to reduce their CO2 footprint. Now, whether that is the reduction of single-use plastic consumption, things like doing a life cycle carbon analysis, innovating packaging and distribution, and ultimately still looking at what is happening in the fields and the orchards, just as much as what's happening at the distillery. So without further ado, I am very excited to introduce you to this amazing panel. First up, we have Mr. Paul Gaby, CEO at ecoSPIRITS. Hi, Paul. Mute, unmute, hello.
Good evening from Singapore, Stephanie and panel. Great to be with you.
Good evening. Now, Paul, as he mentioned, is based in Singapore. I'm sure keen to leave the country, having been confined for almost a year plus. Singapore, I'm always told, is a great place to be as long as you can leave it. But Paul is the co-founder of Proof & Company, one of Asia Pacific's leading independent spirits companies, but actually a native of Vancouver, Canada. Interestingly, the birthplace of modern environmental movement. So really exciting to see how Paul is now helping drive sustainable innovation in the spirits industry by leading the development of ecoSPIRITS, which is the world's first closed-loop technology for premium spirits. Next up, we have Mr. Roel Drost, PhD over in the Netherlands in Amsterdam. Now, Roel is the Chief Value Officer of Ecochain Technologies, the intelligent platform specializing in measuring a company's impact. 15 years experience in sustainability and footprinting. Now, Roel is a strong believer that if you cannot measure it, or if you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So it's really, really important to be understanding the data and the science, because if we are to improve something, we really need to have a starting point in order to get to that next phase. And as my brother in arms, Roel is a keen runner and cyclist. It is worth mentioning that Ecochain have calculated over 300,000 environmental footprints, including Avallen's. Next up, we'll be speaking to Sam. Sam, I never confirmed how to say your surname, so I'm going to go with Boex. This is Sam Boex, co-founder of Flexi-Hex, and an instrumental figure to basically Flexi-Hex's journey, based down in Cornwall. Sam describes himself as being very, very critical in everything to do with the product design, and he really takes the lead on all things creative, pushing the visual boundaries and kind of the technical boundaries of eco packaging. Again, if you don't know Flexi-Hex, please check it out. Tim describes them as a bunch of surfers based down in Cornwall. But basically, after experiencing the growing plastic pollutions in our oceans, decided to do something about it. Started by creating beautifully crafted, innovative cardboard solutions for their surfboards as alternatives to harmful plastic-based packaging, such as bubble wrap. And basically worked out pretty fast that that would be just as an amazing solution for bottles, ultimately, which are shipped left, right, and center. And we're very proud at Avallen to have been one of the first customers and to continue to work with such a pioneering system. And then next up in Cornwall also, obviously, Tim Etherington-Judge. I love saying your full name. My brother-in-arms, co-founder of Avallen, but also the founder of Healthy Hospo, really, really important platform for a happier, healthier hospitality industry. What can I say about Tim? I can say many, many things. Ultimately, he is an eco-warrior through and through. I like to call him the Elon Musk of the drinks world, which I don't know if is ideal because Tim doesn't really want to go to the moon or to Mars and find a planet B. Tim very much wants us to stay here and solve the solutions. Tim believes that we can build a Wakanda, a world whereby we live with leading innovative technology whilst being in a true symbiotic relationship with our natural surroundings. So that is enough from me. The next 90 minutes, just under 90 minutes, we will hear from each of our panelists. You are very welcome to use the Q&A button. If it's relevant, we may ask the question with each panelist as they go through their sessions. Otherwise, we'll keep the Q&A for the end. And just before we kick off, I want to just read this passage from the Be More report, just so we can all be in the right mindset to truly understand what we're about to talk about. And so in the report, and these are actually the words of Tim, he says, CO2 is a funny little thing. Too little of it, and our planet will turn into a frozen rock hurtling through space, and too much of it will warm our climate, disrupting life on Earth. Through the burning of fossil fuels, enormous production of concrete and steel, and rapid deforestation, we have increased concentrations of CO2 in our atmosphere to levels that are causing our planet to heat up dangerously rapidly. So, without further ado, let us hear some solutions to how we can immediately remediate this situation. And therefore, I will pass the mic over to Paul.
Thank you, Stephanie, and it's great to be here with everyone from Singapore. And I find, especially with a panel like this, I look forward to learning as much as I hope to share. What you have on the panel today is a number of panelists and companies that are taking, as Stephanie said, their own action in a small area or an area that's important to them of change that can help lead an industry to a more sustainable future. And so it's really always wonderful to hear the different tacks and the different approaches that people are taking in an area they're passionate about. And what I'll share about today is ecoSPIRITS and our focus on single-use glass and how we're working to tackle that problem in the industry. But before I start, one correction, Stephanie, I don't think Vancouver is the birthplace of the modern environmental movement. There are people in the Netherlands and in the US and other parts of Europe.
One of.
But I did grow up in the mountains of Canada and the Pacific Northwest, Vancouver and Seattle back in the 80s, really bought into the environmental movement in a holistic way. And I did grow up around conversations about sustainability as early as the early 1980s. And now fast forward 40 years to be in an industry that I love, but where the conversation around sustainability is becoming one of the most powerful, most engaged conversations that's happening in the industry today is just wonderful to see. And I do think, despite the challenges we've all faced over the last year and a half with COVID as an industry, it is an exciting time. It's a positive time. It's a forward-looking time in which we have the resources, the technologies we need to solve the problems we face in carbon and look forward to, tackling them. So let me just share screen here quickly and make sure you can see the presentation. And I will ask one of the panelists to just confirm that everything is all clear on the. Okay. Well, our area of passion in the transition to sustainability is circular. I believe deeply that to move forward as a species, as a planet A, as Stephanie would say, to a sustainable future, one of the cornerstones of a transition to sustainable life on this planet will be a move from the linear economy, produce, use, waste, to a circular economy, not just in drinks, but all across all sectors and all forms of consumption. ecoSPIRITS is a circular economy company. We're trying to bring circular principles to the spirits industry. And what I'll take you through over the next 10, 11 minutes is how we're going about doing that. So, just to start with our mission, we're a packaging technology company, so we look to bring innovation to the way spirits are packaged and distributed. We are working to lead a transition to circular, as I talked about. But the big problem we're tackling in the industry is single-use glass. Almost every gin and tonic or martini or Avallen and apple that you've had in your life has come in a single-use glass bottle. Now that bottle might be recycled, but it is single-use. The vast majority of them worldwide go to landfills. And if you look at the life cycle analysis of spirits production, distribution, and consumption, the glass packaging itself, plus the secondary packaging of labels, stoppers, cartons, is a major component of the full carbon footprint of spirit consumption. So our mission is tackling the single-use glass problem, and we've developed a constellation of technologies that do that and make closed-loop service in spirits possible. Just the scale of the problem, I'm not quite sure why we're not talking about single-use glass as an industry. Glass is a more friendly material than, say, plastics or toxic waste in other industries, rare metals and things that come out of the electronic industry, and that might be part of the reason, but glass is very energy intensive, I think, as many or all of the panelists here know today. And the amount of spirit bottle glass consumed worldwide every year is staggering. For the 7 billion or so humans on the planet, there is roughly 40 billion bottles of spirit glass produced and consumed per year. That may sound outrageously high, but when you think that Korea alone consumes somewhere between 3 and 3.5 billion bottles of soju per year, the vast majority in glass packaging, you can see how that adds up to such a big number. Because of the energy intensivity of glass production, there's a substantial amount of carbon emissions associated even just with the production of the glass. When you break it down, the life cycle carbon analysis for a glass bottle, 700 ml or 750 ml, there are various comparators, but it will bring you to the range of about 500 grams, 550 grams, half a kilogram of CO2 emissions per single-use glass bottle. Multiply that 40 billion times a year, send a small minority of those to recycling, which is still quite energy intensive, send the majority of them to landfills, and you start to get a sense of the scale of the challenge we have in bringing about change, but also the opportunity of helping the world decarbonize in our little place in the economy as the spirits and drinks industry. There's also an inside secret that we're speaking to an industry audience today that many people in the industry will know, is that the packaging itself is a substantial component of the overall cost of a bottle of spirits. So pre-duty, before a spirit is imported to a country and excise taxes are paid, it depends on the nature of the spirit, whether it's aged, the relative volume of production. But the majority of the cost of a bottle of spirit pre-duty is often bound up in the packaging itself and in the shipping and handling and transport worldwide to move it from point of distillation to point of consumption. So a transition from linear to circular distribution and consumption of spirits not only saves substantial CO2, it also tackles a major cost component. And you can end up with the win-win scenario, which is what we've tried to address with our technology, where you're saving substantial cost for the producers, for the freight forwarders, for the distributors, for the end bars and restaurants, and at the same time, dramatically reducing overall CO2 footprint. So that combination of environmental impact and then cost reduction lie at the heart of the journey we've been on with ecoSPIRITS. So what are we? We're the first closed loop distribution system for spirits, premium spirits particularly, in the world today. I like history, as I think maybe some of the audience will. It turns out that spirits were always distributed sustainably until about the 1880s, when industrial production of glass became possible. Whether those are demijohns of French cognac or brandy or Calvados, oak casks, clay amphoras going back to Roman times, the transport of spirits to the point of consumption from the point of origin and packaging of spirits was always sustainable for several millennia. It's only with the 1880s and the move from hand-blown glass that was expensive and passed down and reused to industrial production of glass that this whole idea of single use of an expensive carbon and energy intensive packaging like glass became possible. So we've taken a 100-year detour into single use, and one that I believe passionately, all of us at ecoSPIRITS believe, is the detour we now need to reverse and move back to sustainable packaging formats and circular approaches. So that's what ecoSPIRITS is. It's a little hard to go into too much depth on the technology in an 11-minute, 12-minute seminar spot, but circular is complicated. People ask, why has this not been done? If on its surface, circular makes so much sense. It saves money. It dramatically reduces the carbon footprint. It reduces waste to landfill. That sounds brilliantly simple. The impact and the idea of circular is simple, but reimagining the entire value chain of spirit from distillery to bar counter, sometimes 15,000, 18,000, 22,000 kilometers apart, is where the complexity lies. And so ecoSPIRITS started in 2016 from our experience as a spirits distributor here in Asia Pacific, and we slowly tackled all of the problems that closed loop presents, and developed a system of technologies based around our ecotote, which is our core patent pending packaging technology, but a processing containerized EcoPlant technology that allows us to launch closed loop service in any city in the world, a digital smart pouring accessory for venues that make it seamless and hygienic to reuse packaging in the back of house. And so this combination of EcoPlant, EcoTote, and smart pour technologies is how we've, over 3 and 4 years of engineering and commercialization, finally solved holistically the closed loop challenge in a scalable, cost-efficient, and environmentally impactful way. I won't spend too much time on the technology, but this is the EcoTote, something we're very proud of. It's the 3rd generation of the packaging technology. First generation came out in 2017. We began closed loop service in Singapore in 2018. 4.5 liters replaces the standard 6-bottle, half of a 9-liter case of spirits. It's glass, it's almost endlessly reusable. Design life is at least 100 cycles. We believe they can go significantly beyond that. There's many features built into the design: shock resistance, tamper-proof, ergonomics for handling, inventory site window, a global tracking system, cloud-based QR tracking. But in short, a totally reusable glass packaging system that preserves and protects the spirit integrity while totally eliminating the packaging associated with spirits, and therefore nearly eliminating the carbon footprint. Circular has many benefits. If you can solve those really difficult problems and complex problems that I showed you in the supply chain, you can unlock some very substantial benefits. Our circular technology eliminates, for instance, for producers like Avallen, 90% of the packaging cost, which Stephanie and Tim know is substantial, in the bottles themselves, in the labels, in the stoppers, in the cartons, in the pallets that you put the cartons on, and then all the labor and machinery associated with that packaging step in the supply chain. So if you can reduce 90% of the packaging cost from the product, you can invest more in the quality of the liquid, or you can reduce the end price to your customers, the trade venues in London, in a city that you're distributing a circular way. For operators, there are also substantial benefits. ecoSPIRITS delivers a reduction in delivered cost for spirits. So if you are pouring a bottle of, say, plantation rum at Marina Bay Sands, very large integrated resort here in Singapore, in the traditional 700 ml glass bottle, and then you order it a week later in the ecoSPIRITS closed loop format, you save about 20%. It's the same liquid, but you're saving cost, you're giving the same guest experience to your customers. You're able to pour good quality liquids, but you're improving your profitability. We also, through the density of our closed loop system, reduce back of house storage space, which is often in shortage for venues by around 50%. And then for anyone who's worked in hospitality, that end of night ritual of dragging the bins out to the back alley and lining them up is, as far as the spirits that you're pouring through a closed loop technology, ecoSPIRITS, 95% of that waste is reduced. No more glass bottles out to recycling or waste at the end of the night, no cardboard cartons, no stoppers, and significant impact. For society, obviously substantial benefits: less physical waste going to landfills, less recycling cycles, less cardboard waste. Consumers can also engage with circular and feel good about their choices. They can drink an Avallen and tonic and know that they've saved 150 grams of carbon emissions per serve and feel good about that. So there are, when we transition to circular, I think we can all see there are enormous benefits for society. So just a quick look at how does ecoSPIRITS engage on menus and how do we interact with the consumer. This is something that the venues celebrate. We have about 600 to 700 venue partners in Asia Pacific using the technology, large and small bars, restaurants, hotels that have adopted the technology and use it to reduce their costs and reduce their waste footprint. They showcase it on menus. You can call out a spirit that is poured through ecoSPIRITS like Plantation Rum and the cocktail there on the right. You can celebrate as a venue your partnership with ecoSPIRITS and the impact you're having on reducing waste. We have a forest program that supplements the CO2 reduction of the waste elimination and increases the CO2 impact for customer. And then we break it down to a single serve because at a guest level, that's a powerful way to communicate and then to feel that their purchasing decision, choosing the the second cocktail on that list instead of the first, is saving X amount of CO2 and reducing waste. Just a quick note on our forest program. We are a sustainability company. We're on a journey to become a certified B Corp, hopefully later this year. We're a pending B Corp. I'm very keen to hear from Roel about the work they do in LifeCycle carbon analysis, but we take our own carbon footprint and that of our technology very seriously. We work with Deloitte as our carbon auditors out of Singapore here. They've done a full LifeCycle carbon analysis of our technology itself versus the single-use glass comparator. But we also have additional programs. We commit to a reforestation program with our spirit partners and others who use the technology, where one tree is planted not for the production of each ecotote, but for every cycle. So every time a bar, restaurant, and hotel orders an ecotote that has been refilled and gone through the closed loop in our system, we plant one more tree. For Asia Pacific, it's in Borneo. For the European markets that are launching now, it will be in Uganda. But there's a reforestation with these wonderful partners called Green Step Group that have a digital interface we developed with them. The bars, restaurants, and hotels can actually display their forest with geotagging of the trees and carbon data to guests, so you can link from the menu to the forest in Borneo and see the actual tree and the reforester who planted the tree on behalf of the drink choice you've just made. So it makes it real, and it's also transparent, verifiable, reported, and audited. Often I don't put this up, but people ask us, is the industry ready for circular? It is a change. It changes the way we handle as producers, as distributors, as bars and restaurants, as wholesalers, as consumers. It is dramatic change. We've developed a way to do it seamlessly so we don't break the guest experience. It's easy to adopt for bars. It's easy for wholesalers and importers to adopt. But the response over the last 2 years has been tremendous. The industry is ready for sustainable solutions. The pace at which bars and restaurants in Asia Pacific have adopted the ecoSPIRITS technology has far exceeded our expectations when we launched it. We expected a lot of objections. Well, I run my back of house this way. I've been doing it for years. Why would I make a change? It's been the opposite. Everyone has warmly received the innovation and has just looked at how can I participate? How can I get more onto the system so that I have more impact? And thought leaders in the industry are showing that our industry is ready for change. And that, I think, is the really exciting part. And then I'll close just with a thought about what circular means. This is a palette of ecototes. Ecototes are a little bit like Lego pieces. They nest together. So it's a very secure way to stack. We've got, we don't recommend it, but bars in Australia having stacking contests of how high they stack their ecototes. But for palletization, it's very secure. It's very efficient for transport. They're like Legos. It becomes a block that is secure and stable for the supply chain. It's more efficient. The equivalent about 800 or 900 bottles fits on a pallet of spirit versus 500 or 600 in traditional format. And this simple picture of a reimagined palette of spirits that's about to go out into the world and into the consumption cycle for us represents a circular future. If we can transition to these type of solutions, we can have an impact. And when you scale it to the level of an industry-wide, it's a substantial impact. So I'm very positive about the future of sustainability in the industry. Obviously, circular is our mission, my personal passion. Hopefully I've given you in the last 10, 12 minutes a good sense of a little bit of what we do and why we're excited about circular. But I really, really believe that circular is a core part of the future of this industry and that we can get there now. So that's it, Stephanie. I tried not to run over. I think I'm on time. So hopefully
that was amazing. So inspiring. Such important work, Paul. I think I even saw a Christmas tree made out of some eco totes at one point.
We have a wonderful bar in Hong Kong led by Agung Prabhao from Old Man fame, and they've developed the first bar in Asia Pacific that is a closed loop concept bar. The whole bar is designed around the closed loop idea. And yes, they made their Christmas tree out of eco totes last year, and that was in the entrance way for guests as they came in.
Stunning.
So, but thank you for the time, and hopefully that sharing was valuable.
Thank you, Paul. And may I just ask a question? Tim and I recently were having some kind of coaching conversations with a good industry friend, and he said to us, "You guys, you're not squares, you're circle people. Circle people are crazy." So I'm going to assume, Paul, you're a circle person. What really drives you and motivates you to make this a global reality for the on-trade?
I'm a weird mix of circle and square person, so I can't say I'm fully either, but what drives me is this sense that change is possible now. We have the ability to bring solutions to global scale in the industry, and we have a willingness in the industry. I really believe it. I don't doubt that 10 years from now, this industry can be sustainable, and that now, perhaps unlike 10 years ago, our consumers are ready, our peers in the industry are ready, and our ability to innovate and bring technologies to market and to scale like ecoSPIRITS is very, very possible now. And so that's what gets me up every morning, and I am deeply, deeply positive about the future of the industry on the sustainability front.
Amazing. So your theme song is also "The Time Is Now."
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Or the future is circular if there was a song like that.
Well, maybe we'll record it. To our audience, if you do have any questions for Paul, please do use the Q&A button. He is here to answer them directly. In the meantime, we are going to move on to the next phase of today's session. But before we do that, we have a little question for you all. Question number one today is, and panelists, you may also answer, what do you think is the biggest cause of CO2 emissions in the production of alcohol? Do you think this happens at the distillery? Do you think it is the bottle? Do you believe it's happening in the fields, the vineyards, the orchards? Or is it the distribution of the finished product? Got a couple more seconds to answer. Tim, I will let you reveal. Bum, ba, bum, bum, bum. And we've got 7:10. Come on, a few more people to vote. And the answer is...
Only one person got it right. It's the fields, vineyards, and orchards. But it's also, we'll talk about it in a bit. It's an area that is not often factored into emissions when it comes to alcohol production.
Fantastic. So that's really, really insightful. I think it's obviously important to remind ourselves that every single one of these four matter, and we need solutions at all levels. But for us as well with Avallen, it was really important to start with the orchards and then work with a whole series of amazing people, including Roel, to understand the rest. So Roel, may I pass the mic over to you, please?
Yeah, thanks. And it's a pleasure to be on this call. So what I will be doing is sharing my screen. So please bear with me. Sorry. So can you see the slides? Very good. Hey, so a real pleasure to be here. Tim asked me to tell a bit about the company, to tell a bit about the project we have been doing for Avallen, but also share, the added value of doing a life cycle assessment. And so I'll be elaborating on those topics in this call. So a few words about Ecochain. We are a purpose-driven company. We want to empower sustainable impact. And how we do that, we deliver what we call environmental intelligence to our customers, so that they are able to make smarter decisions, how to design a product, how to build circular business models, or make environmental claims to the market. How do we do that? We have software that we deliver to clients, but we also have services. And most of our clients actually use both. We work across various sectors, including construction, textile, food and beverage. And yeah, feel free to browse on our website to find out more about what we do and how we do it. But let me take you a couple of years back, because life cycle assessment is not something new. Although the interest in this is rising rapidly, the instrument has existed for already 52 years. So in 1969, this beautiful footprint was made on the moon surface. But in that year, it was also Coca-Cola who made its first product footprint. And there was a person at Coke who was thinking, yeah, what if I look at loss of resources and loss of energy? Couldn't we use that information to enhance the economical performance of the product? And he in fact looked at the environmental performance to enhance the economics. Actually, something that Paul also addressed in his talk, because cost savings and environmental performance, not always, but it can go hand in hand. Sustainability is by no means a cost all time. It can be a benefit also economically. Now, how does that actually work? So a life cycle assessment, as the name already suggests, we look at the life cycle of a product. So not just one phase of production. So we look at the packaging in the orchard, transport, the distillery, and yes, the end of life. You know, we excluded that from the analysis for Avallen, but in principle, we look at the entire life cycle of a product. And then we also look at various environmental impacts. So climate change is a dominant impact for many products and services, but there are also other known impacts that have been around for years. You know, remember in the 80s when we had acid rain that's caused by acidification, resource depletion, particulate matter is an issue that has been around for ages. Toxicities, especially even in the Netherlands, a well-developed country like the Netherlands, currently there are many construction projects on hold due to toxicity issues here. So the construction is in crisis here in the Netherlands due to environmental issue. But I must admit, climate change is, I mean, the crisis has been mentioned already quite some times in this call. Climate change is dominant. So let me give you a few examples how companies are working with life cycle assessment and footprinting information. So here I put a few screenshots on the slide just to show you what companies are doing. So this is a beer brewery that we implemented. Here you see a graph of a portfolio of beer products. Each bar in this case denotes a product. And if you then in our software click that bar, a product graph will open up and it will show you the different environmental contribution in terms of CO2 impact. It's the packaging materials, barley, yeast, plastic packaging. And this helps companies to really reveal the environmental hotspots in their portfolio. But in the software, you can also drill down into the production processes, which is very interesting, for instance, for process engineers who can really make a change there. Now, another example is an example that I took from a completely other industry, but it's one of our clients here in the Netherlands, is Philips. They have healthcare equipment, but also consumer lifestyle products like these. This is a hairdryer. And how they use it, here you see the environmental hotspots from this hairdryer. You see all the different components in this product. You can even do that for a spirits product. It will look different, of course, but the principles are the same. So in this product, there is a printed wire board, a power cord, and then there are all kinds of polymers, so plastics being used for the housing. And within our software, you can make changes to the product to come up with an eco design. And at the right-hand side, you see an eco design product here, where the designer changed some of the polymer materials and replaced it with recycled PET. And then you can immediately see the footprint impact, which was reduced from 7.85 kilograms to a little bit less than 7 kilograms. Philips are currently using that in their R&D community to help make a change in the product design phase. Let's go back to Avallen. So what did we do? One of the first things you do in a life cycle assessment, you set the objective and the scope and the boundaries. Now, this graph, I'm sure with you being the specialist, you will recognize the supply chain for the Calvados of Avallen, starting in the orchards, then going through the production processes with raw materials also like label, seal, the packaging materials coming in. And, as you can see in this graph, we used what we call a cradle to gate analysis. So we've assessed the complete product until the factory gate. And then, of course, there is still transport. And then at the end of life, the packaging materials are, go into a waste process. But that has not been part of this analysis. Now, the results, and I'm sure Tim will elaborate a little bit more about it. I'm sure that you have seen the report. We are looking at a carbon positive product here, and I'll be spending a little bit more time on that to explain that in a little bit more detail. If you open up the Avallen report, you can see the results. And what we included also in there is a benchmark to some other products. Yeah, I welcome you to read the report. But let's dive into why is this a carbon positive product? Now, what we highlighted here you see the three different colors. The spirit is indicated in this light red color. In red, the bottle, and in green, the impacts in the orchard, which I will be spending more time on, because why is it positive? So the carbon is what we call being sequestered during the growth of the apple tree. Yeah? So in fact, an apple tree is capturing carbon during its life cycle. And of course, each year it is growing apples. Those apples are being harvested. That is not included in this analysis. So the carbon capture by the apple itself is excluded because that's really short cycle carbon. What we looked at is the long-term carbon storage by the bark and the branches of the tree. Now, we didn't calculate that. So we built actually on science. So there have been many scientists who have studied this in more detail. And we basically used science to calculate the carbon sequestration in the orchard. And in this case, we used the paper by Scandalari to account for the carbon sequestration in the orchards. Apple trees grow old. They can grow like 100 years or even longer than that. So the carbon is really stored for quite a long term. Now, what I wanted to close off with, if you are interested in doing a life cycle assessment yourself, what is the kind of data that you would need to gather? And so to give you an idea, we have this slide. We've prepared this slide. So this is again the life cycle inventory for Avallen. And what you typically need is for the incoming materials, you would need the type of material, the mass of those material. So basically what we would call the bill of material. We have an environmental database that has all kinds of background information for paper, for polymer materials, for plastics, for glass. So typically we use the EcoInvent database for that. EcoInvent has, I think, about 17 or 18,000 materials in their that we can use as a reference. Now you would need the energy consumption within the distillery and the whole primary process. Of course, you would need the yields from the harvest, so the harvesting process, the number of tons per hectare. You would need transport distances. Now, I know that this list is not complete, but these will be the most elementary data that you would need. Yeah, and then once again, for the growing of the apples, in this case, we used science to account for the carbon sequestration because it's such a dominant impact for Avallen. Yeah, we decide to do this in a very rigorous way, use many background articles to get accurate information from that. So I think from my side, that's it. Back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Roel. That's it's so interesting to understand how I think ultimately the bigger companies are starting to use these life cycles. You know, Tim and I with Avallen started with a blank sheet of paper. We always knew that we wanted to try and build this planet positive brand. So we were able from the outset to choose our raw material with that kind of knowledge that it would have that carbon positivity. But ultimately, you know, small startups, we're here to inspire and lead change, but it's so critical that the big boys get behind this. So I find that so interesting to see how Philips are already using it at an innovation stage, because unfortunately it's very, very hard to retrofit sustainability, right?
So I think you're completely right. And big companies have embraced this, but also here in the Netherlands, there's quite another interesting thing ongoing in the construction industry. The construction industry in the Netherlands are using life cycle assessment in their procurement processes. And nowadays, it is the case that in construction, the suppliers of the contractors and the suppliers of them, for them, it's a license to operate, because if they don't have this information, they're basically out of business. So it becomes some sort of mandatory thing, and that's really making a change. So yeah, and we see the interest. So of course, everyone got scared in March 2020 because of COVID. How is it going to impact my business? We had the same. But in fact, our business has grown dramatically over the last year. And yeah, I know that not every industry can say that, but it's just the interest in footprinting the momentum it's here and now. Huh? So absolutely, it's really growing fast.
Amazing. And I think you touched on something which is so pivotal. It's to remind ourselves all that it is an ecosystem, that we all work together with various suppliers, and that it's important that we are all doing the work together so that collectively we end up with these finished goods, which are consequently transported as well and reach our homes in the best way possible. Thank you so much, Roel. I think you've got a question in the Q&A from Laura. So I'll let you have a look at that. And just before we hear from Mr. Boex, I would just like to launch one more question. So for those of you listening, if you were to have any CO2 goals, and again, assuming that you were to have some, and if you don't yet, great, maybe that you start to think about it, what would those goals be for? Would it be to reduce the footprint of yourself, of your product as much as possible? Would you be looking to go carbon neutral, or would you really try and aim to go for climate positivity? We'd be curious to hear from the panelists as well. Fantastic. Okay, and so this isn't a wrong or right, this is really just where we are all at here and now. Fantastic to see the majority would like to strive for carbon positivity, as hard and challenging as that may seem. Hopefully it should get easier, but I agree, the starting point, you know, that one foot in front of the other is really just about, for now, learning to reduce. And in order to reduce, we need to also understand. And that's a huge part of this whole vision that we're having, right? It's really getting that education to trickle all the way down into the end citizens. And that's something that I know we're all working on individually. Right, Sam, we would love to hear from you. You are one of the solutions. So let us know. What have you got to say? What's happening down in Cornwall?
Thank you, Stephanie. Yes, all good down here. Thank you. I'm going to share screen now. Can you see that? No. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to talk through. Really interesting to hear the rest of the panelists there on this discussion, and like you said, Stephanie, I think it's about kind of all pushing in a sort of shared and common goal to kind of create a really strong kind of sustainable message. And I think the smaller businesses are able to react and sort of make those changes within their sort of like strategy at a much quicker pace. And the bigger companies are now starting to look and at how the smaller companies are making that change. So I think, you know, although it sometimes feels like a huge mountain to climb, I think, you know, the impact that is happening with innovation is yeah, very real. So I want to talk to you today about Flexi-Hex. We are a very new business. We've been going since 2018. And the journey started when I received a surfboard online, and I bought this surfboard, and it arrived a few days later, covered in. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the slides down. Yeah, I received the surfboard. It arrived a couple of days later. I opened this big box up, and this I was sort of greeted to what I can only describe as kind of a sea of bubble wrap, and I just felt there must be a better, firstly, must be a better consumer experience in packaging a surfboard, and secondly, you know, this was a colossal amount of bubble wrap. It was upwards of 10 meters of bubble wrap, which you know is very, very difficult to recycle. So it was inevitably going to end up in landfill. So I'm from a design background of 15 years in product and interior design, and I thought there must be a better solution out there. And after a kind of initial research, kind of it showed that there wasn't really much more available than bubble wrap for packaging kind of surfboards and sports equipment. So I work with my twin brother. We're mirror twins and have been in business for 15 years with a design company. And we kind of set ourselves a little sideline project to develop a packaging solution for surfboards using a more sustainable material. So, and we eventually, yeah, over sort of 6 to 8 months, developed this product called Flexi-Hex, which is a paper-based solution. But I want to talk about, you know, the plastic initially, which is used in so much of the packaging currently globally through kind of so many different market sectors. It's actually obviously an incredibly versatile material, plastic. It's incredibly strong, it's incredibly light. But as we know, you know, with kind of the stark reality is that it's incredibly difficult to recycle, and also takes, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years to biodegrade, if at all. So it's, you know, has it's a very damaging material in many ways, but equally it's incredibly practical. So we were faced with a tricky sort of I suppose conundrum in that sort of the materials we could use, and which was in developing the actual product. We happened upon paper. You know, the product itself is, you know, upwards of 2,000 years old. It's a tried and tested material. It's also a material which is readily available. It sends very strong messaging to the consumer around what you can do with the material and how it can be recycled. It's biodegradable, and it's obviously kind of compostable as well. So the product we developed here for the surfboard, I'm going to come on to kind of how we adapted it for the drinks market in a minute. But as you can see here, it's a paper-based honeycomb sleeve which expands and forms around objects. So the product itself is incredibly low volume and lightweight, but when you put it around an object, it consumes the object and creates this kind of cushioning around the object, which ultimately protects the object in transit. And the business is very much focused on the e-commerce kind of D2C, direct to consumer market. We're focused in this space, and obviously, and that's what obviously the surge in e-commerce and sales is kind of driving kind of the growth in the business. So this is the board sports market. And Flexi-Hex itself, as it says, it's a patented product. As you can see a detail of the image there, it's made up of this paper honeycomb material, which is actually a readily commercially available material already set up globally to produce in kind of large quantities. The material itself is 100% recycled content, and we use water-based glues for the product. So the whole product itself is curbside recycling, can go straight back into a recycling system and be pulped and made back into paper, and we try and encourage be reused, whether either through returns or saving the product and using it, whether it's another surf trip or sending a bottle back for a refill. And like I mentioned earlier, it's incredibly kind of efficient on the speed it is to pack and also the kind of the volume as well. So this is how we have kind of, I suppose, developed and refined the product. As you can see on the left there, working closely with Avallen in the early days of the product to develop a solution for the bottle and the drinks market. And we again are in this kind of high volume kind of direct to consumer space, working with distilleries, large and small, but also logistics companies. And I suppose one of the USPs of Flexi-Hex is its flexibility. So we have one type of product, which is we call it the mini sleeve or bottle sleeve, and that packages 96% of kind of the bottle shapes in the UK and European market. So we operate as a business on a very small number of product SKUs. And this is a huge advantage for kind of logistics companies being out, they might be sending out kind of upwards of 50, 60 different sort of bottle shapes and sizes out of one warehouse. And we, the sleeve can cover and fit that number of different SKUs. And all the products we use, I say 100% paper based and use 100% recycled content. And we try and look at things like kind of the print content, reducing the amount of print content on material, so it makes the product very easy to recycle. But there are lots of alternatives, paper alternatives out there on the market, and some very effective ones. And we're I suppose a new product now in entering into this space. But what we're finding is we're ticking a lot of boxes. From a consumer point of view, but also from a business point of view, because it's all well and good that a product looks really good. It obviously needs to work really well, but then there are other factors involved. It needs to kind of take up as little space as possible in a warehouse. Also, from a volumetrics point of view, shipping. If you can we can get upwards of 180,000 sleeves on a single container. So, hugely kind of saving on the footprint, the carbon footprint of shipping. And also bulkiness, pulp kind of molded pulp solutions are incredibly bulky. They're incredibly effective, but they are bulky as well. So, but all these paper solutions work well in this market, and we're just, I say, another product entering into this market. But like I mentioned, 85% of paper is currently recycled in the European market, which is a product people resonate with and associate with and understand how to use and how to kind of how to manage the material, I suppose. but like I mentioned, you know, it's all well and good having a sustainable product, but businesses won't buy into that product unless it meets other criteria, and that is it needs to be comparable on price. It also needs to be super easy to use, quick to use, and also easy to store. And we're amazed as we enter into the market. We listened, again, being a sort of a startup business, we listened to feedback, you know, very early on in the product launch, and adapted and changed products to suit the business's requirements. And I think feedback is, you know, with regards to kind of the types of materials, the size of the sleeve, trying to kind of eliminate any material which wasn't required in the production of the product. And you can see here on this slide, the volumetrics on the left-hand side is the equivalent amount of bubble wrap needed to wrap a product versus the Flexi-Hex sleeves, which is on the right-hand side. So, you know, it's a huge saving, and we're very close to crossing the line with a big partner in the UK. And you know, the current saving in the warehouse, I think it's something like, I think it's like 2 pallets of Flexi-Hex over 12 pallets of their current packaging. So it's a huge difference in saving, and at that scale, it's a big cost saving, but also a big sort of carbon saving as well. But it needs to be, you know, the packaging itself, it needs to kind of elevate the consumer experience. When you receive something online, the consumer, it needs to be functional, but ultimately it's just it's almost like the new shop front for businesses. You know, sending out a product to the consumer, how will it look, how will it feel, and how is that consumer, how is that sort of like person going to interact with that product? And packaging ultimately is the first thing that consumer will see. So it has, again, you know, that the aesthetic and how it functions, how it uses is a big factor. And it's sort of a happy accident with us. We, you know, when early on in the actual development of the product, we realized that actually you could still have a protected product which had holes in, you know, and that then realized that you know, you could actually then see the product through that. So you had a lovely reveal to the packaging. And we're constantly getting kind of people posting, you know, on our kind of social feeds, the packaging. They receive a product, but they're posting about the packaging, which is a lovely kind of, I suppose, accolade to the product and the business. And we're seeing, you know, with you know, obviously with COVID, we've seen a huge surge in e-commerce, and the space we operate in is very much that we sell B2B, we're selling to the businesses, but the space we're consumer facing, so we're operating in that space where it's that direct to consumer space. And so there's you know, distilleries and kind of have had to work very quickly and working out how to change their business models during the kind of over the last year to get kind of products to the end consumers via different channels, and that usually is through the courier system. And that's, you know, if you're passionate about sustainability, then you need to focus on, you know, we've been, I suppose, a litmus paper to seeing how that kind of like these businesses have had to change. And because I say it's driven by you know, consumers. 9 in 10 British consumers want packaging to be classed as recyclable. 36% of Europeans are boycotting brands over packaging sustainability concerns, and 50% of consumers would be willing to pay higher price to avoid plastic packaging. So some interesting kind of statistics there. And again, it's on the agenda, and so in so many aspects of you know, both from the government, the businesses, and being pushed from the consumer level as well as sort of NGOs, and also, you know, higher things like the G7 as well. So it's being pushed from every aspect globally, which is really exciting. It means you're getting kind of like, yeah, a buy-in from now much bigger global businesses because of this push away from and push into more sustainable materials and more sustainable ways to package. And I think this slide kind of sort of maybe represents, it shows the stark comparison to, you know, how bottles are traditionally packaged in plastic on the left-hand side. It's a good solution, it works, but ultimately when you receive a kind of inflatable kind of air sac, it's incredibly difficult to recycle. You then have to, you know, and as a consumer experience, you have to sort of manhandle this bottle out of this sleeping bag, and it's and it, again, you know, it's a plastic product which takes upwards of 1,000 years to biodegrade. And then on the right-hand side is the Flexi-Hex solution, which, you know, is 100% paper-based, uses water-based glues. And we think sort of has a strong sort of brand and aesthetic element as well to the consumer. But the whole thing can be, say, recycled or reused if you're using a return system within your business. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. It is such stunning work. It, you know, really, I think it reminds us of a previous Positively Charged where we were looking at the realities is that we don't have a waste problem, we have a design problem, and you're showing that firsthand. You know, the solution can be incredibly sexy. And there's no reason why you wouldn't use a Flexi-Hex. It's really that simple. It's the only option really for us in any case. Can I just ask you, in terms of what have you found? I mean, because you're just about as old as Avallen, right? As a company, we're all kind of brand spanking new. What have you found the hardest, but also what's been the kind of easiest thing around building your company so far?
That's a really interesting question. I think when you know, like you would have experienced as well, when you go into a business, I suppose, relatively naive. I mean, we've been in another business, product design business, 15 years. But when you start a new business, you're incredibly passionate, you know, incredibly enthusiastic, and you think, okay, this product, you know, seems to work really well. People are going to engage, and it's going to be, you know, an instant hit. And it's amazing, kind of like how humbling business is. You know, it actually takes a huge amount of time to convert, to educate, to kind of like send these messages to people, and to slowly turn the wheels of converting and getting people to kind of engage in a product. So, and what we're finding now, I suppose that's the hardest bit. It has literally been two years, and you know, companies who were dead against the product 2 years ago and now starting to convert and now love the product. And the product hasn't changed, nothing's changed. It's just, you know, changing people's mindsets. But the exciting thing is that when you do change someone's mindset and they do start adopting packaging like Flexi-Hex or a new product, then the momentum starts building, and then, you know, conversions become easier and easier and easier. And that's sort of, I think we're at a stage now in the business, you know, there's 11 of us in the business now, and it's starting, you know, you take on another 3 people like 2 weeks ago, and, you know, it's now kind of starting to build quite quickly, and we're getting, just to say, really strong and positive feedback on the product.
Amazing. Tim, can you just flash our latest work? Because I think for me, there's a few things that are really important. 1, it isn't more expensive, quite the opposite. 2, you can brand them up and personalize them and make them look absolutely stunning, right? Whilst retaining this kind of standardized solution. And I don't know, 3, like, again, they're just sexy, aren't they? They're really fantastic. I'm about to buy a paddleboard. I don't have a surfboard, but I'm hoping it's going to come in one of those kits, because they're just an unboxing. You're so on trend. You need to get all those YouTubers to start unboxing Flexi-Hexes for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's good. It's a fun journey, and I think I think we say the exciting thing is there are so many different market sectors. Obviously, you know, the drinks industry has received our product amazingly well, and it's literally 80 to 90% of our revenue. So we're so privileged to be working in this space.
Yeah,
but equally, there's other kind of market sectors which are now starting to show interest, from cosmetics to consumer electronics. So yeah, it's exciting times. It's good, and thank you for championing our product, and, you know, say being advocates right from the beginning. So hugely appreciate your support.
Collaboration, compassion, care is the only way forward, isn't it, Sam?
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much. You have a quick question in around your sources as well. If you could have a look at the Q&A, we'd love to know where you got some of those stats from. And now it is over to the infamous Mr. TEJ. Tim, what are you going to talk to us about today?
I'm quite nervous for this one for a change. Got a few butterflies going on.
Yay! Like when you go on stage.
Just a bit
I miss
different.
those butterflies.
Yeah, me too. I want to start by saying that one of my very favorite things about what we've done with Avallen and launching this company is that we get to work with some really true innovators in our industry. You know, people like ecoSPIRITS and Flexi-Hex and Ecochain. It just makes it so exciting that you get to work with these people at the very cutting edge of innovation who have the same dream that we do of a better way of doing business, of, you know, a really beautiful future where we live in harmony with our planet. And it's just incredible to see the passion that people like Paul and Sam and Roel bring to the business. And it makes our job so much more fun. So what I'm going to talk about, so we've kind of looked at, so far, we've looked at the distribution, we've looked at doing a life cycle analysis, we've looked at innovations in packaging. I'm going to wind all the way back to where alcohol starts. We had a little poll earlier. We looked at what is the biggest environmental impact of alcohol production. And it turns out it is in the orchards, in the fields, in the vineyards, in the plantations. But if we go and have a look at some industry numbers that are available to everybody. So the Beverage Industry Roundtable, also Environmental Roundtable, is a group of the 19 largest alcohol companies in the world. And in 2019, they released a report that looked at the environmental impact of producing beer, wine, and spirits. And the number that we're really interested in is spirits, because that's what we're talking about today. But it's 697 grams of CO2 equivalent per liter of alcohol on average. And that number probably means nothing to anybody here. But what's really interesting for me about this number is that it only pertains to what happens at the distillery. There is no input into the CO2 footprint of the raw material or what happens after production. So, you know, where Paul and Sam are focused on innovating. So it's only what happens at the distillery. And still this number is quite large. The water is also the same. So the water consumption is also only used at the distillery. So it doesn't take into account any artificial irrigation that is used in processing the raw material. But all alcohol, with the exception of one brand that I know of, which is Air Company Vodka out of the US, which are making their alcohol directly from carbon capture. All alcohol starts life as an agricultural product. So if we're true, you know, we're going to be true to calculating the carbon impact of alcohol, we absolutely must look at the impact of the raw material that we are using to produce our alcohol. All right, how do we go to the next slide? Sorry, I've got a new computer. I'm still gone from Windows to Mac. So if I'm a bit slow, please excuse me.
It's appropriate for you to have an Apple. I've already agreed.
Yeah, it does feel right now. So if we look at the kind of the total or environmental footprint of an alcohol product, it starts in the fields, the orchards, the vineyards, the plantations. It has an impact at the distillery, which we can look at. And there's also the bottle packaging design. And then we move on to the route to market impacts. But Paul and Sam have already covered the kind of the bottle, the packaging and innovations in those. So I'm going to focus on the orchard and the distillery. So let's start. We're going to use two examples here. So on the left, we've got barley, which is one of the core ingredients in whiskey around the world. So if you've ever drunk a single malt, it will be made from 100% malted barley. It's also a key ingredient in bourbons such as Maker's Mark, Bullets, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels. Most scotches will contain barley. So it's a very, very widely used ingredient in alcohol production. So according to I get to hang out on some of the most interesting websites in the world. So the Malt Association of Great Britain not a website you kind of casually stumble across, but they've done some work and published great figures around the CO2 equivalent impacts of malt barley production. And more than 60% of the impact of growing barley comes from fossil fuels. So fossil fuel fertilizers. So a huge impact there is coming solely from the use of these fossil fuel based fertilizers. That's factored in. What they don't factor into their production as well is the CO2 that is emitted from soil disruption. So every year when you harvest the barley, you disturb the soil in the harvesting and replanting. Now, soil contains more carbon dioxide than all of the forests on Earth. It's a huge carbon sink. And every time we disturb the soil, whether that's going out into the garden and digging a hole, or in this case, kind of enormous agricultural farming processes, we are releasing CO2 from that soil. So there is a huge impact here from this raw material that far exceeds anything that happens at the distillery or involved in the packaging. When we factor in the use of the fossil fuel-based fertilizers and the till-based agriculture that disturbs the soil. On the right, we've got our good friend sugarcane, one of the world's most favorite products. My grammar is terrible. Sugar has revolutionized the world in so many ways, both good and terrible. But it's used in alcohol. It's used to make rum and cachaça. It's the core ingredient of there. And again, we have some huge impacts that need to be factored into our carbon analysis. And again, it comes down to fossil fuel-based fertilizers that are used extensively to grow sugarcane. Again, it is an annual crop, so every year it needs to be reharvested. So unlike our wonderful apple trees over in Normandy, every year you've got to cut down the entire product and regrow it, whereas all we do is pick up some apples from the floor after they've fallen off the tree. But what you also have with sugarcane is one of the harvesting processes, which is extremely toxic for the environment, which is where they set fire to the cane fields. So sugarcane is a grass, and it has extremely sharp leaves. And it also grows in tropical areas which are abundant in some quite dangerous animals, such as poisonous snakes and spiders. So by setting fire to the tops of the cane, it not only forces those deadly animals to leave the fields, making it less dangerous to harvest, it also burns away those really razor sharp leaves. So it makes the whole processing of the harvesting of the cane much easier. And it also works to concentrate the sugars in the cane, so it becomes a little bit easier when it's processing at the distillery. So according to another research paper, it seems that everyone on this panel loves to read research papers. 44% of the carbon impact of sugarcane comes solely from that process of burning the cane. So a simple stage a simple process that the rum industry could take to enormously reduce their carbon emissions is to move to a process of not burning sugarcane in the plantations. Then we've got what happens at the distillery. So Steph ran a little competition earlier. So I will give somebody a bottle of Avallen if they can name this distillery. They can tell me where this distillery is, the brand.
Play.
You can play.
So
we get to this. So once we've got the raw material, whether that's the malted barley or our molasses, so the sugarcane will be processed into molasses, or it's the apples. There is a whole series of processes that happen at the distillery to convert the alcohol, the raw material into alcohol. Depending on your raw material, depends on the number of processes. So for us at Avallen, all we need to do is wash and juice the apples. So it's extremely minimal, low energy processing to turn our raw material into alcohol. For something like malted barley, you have to not only take the barley, you have to let it germinate, which uses warm water. So you're using energy there. Once it's germinated, you then need to grind it into a flour. So that's more energy. Then you need to add warm water to turn that flour into a sugary liquid, which you can then ferment. And that also uses more energy as well as water. So every single step of processing, say, malted barley, you have to use more energy to process that. Same with sugarcane, because you need to turn the juice of the sugarcane into molasses. Obviously, you have sugar as one product and you have the molasses as another product, but that takes a great amount of heat and energy. So there's all of these processes. Then you have some CO2 associated with the fermentation of the liquid, which takes your sugary liquid, turns it into an alcohol somewhere between 7 to 10%. And then you've got to do the distillation. So distillation, because you are heating the liquid to very high temperatures, is quite energy intensive. So there the questions are around what kind of heating elements are you using? Are you using a gas-fired still, which is the case we use in Avallen? We are still unfortunately based with the LPG heated stills, which gives us a room for improvement, but you can move to kind of electric steam-based heats and all sorts of other more sustainable processes. And then finally, we've got the electricity and the energy that's used in the bottling line and the packing lines. Again, quite a small amount of energy in comparison to some of the other elements, but it still needs to be factored in, and we can still find improvements in efficiencies in those bottling lines. So that's a little breakdown of all of the aspects that go into kind of producing alcohol before we get into, the bottle and the packaging side of things, because Paul and Sam have already covered that. So what can you do if you're a brand owner or you work for a brand to reduce those carbon impacts? So one thing you can do is to encourage your supplier to practice no-till farming, which is a method of farming cereal grains where you don't disturb the soil, thus leaving that CO2 that is already stored in the soil, you're leaving it in the soil and not releasing it back into the atmosphere. Or, as we said, going through no burning policies within the sugarcane fields. Explore organic and non-fossil fuel-based fertilizer options. So as we saw, particularly in the case of barley, fossil fuel-based fertilizers have an enormous CO2 impact. So looking towards more organic production can really help with that, or more natural-based fertilizers. Consider raw materials such as fruits that produce a crop year after year, so you don't need to harvest the entire crop for your processing. So, we use apples. We don't cut down the apple tree every year. Those apple trees will grow for 50 plus years and give us a crop for at least kind of 40 plus of those years. And every year that tree is sequestering more carbon dioxide into its trunk, into its branches, into its soil. So it's constantly taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and putting it into the ground. So, and I don't think there's enough variety. We call it biodiversity on the back bar, a term coined by James Chase in one of our talks. I don't think there's enough biodiversity on the back bar when it comes to the raw materials that we can use to make alcohol. There are so many out there that produce really interesting flavors, have much lower CO2 footprints. So, if you work in a bar, have a look at increasing that biodiversity of raw material in your back bar with some really interesting products. Renewable energy at the distillery goes without saying. Sign up to a tariff with 100% renewable energy. Works in the offices, it works the energy that you use on the bottling line, other aspects of the distillery. Consider using your waste material to create biogas for boilers and still heating. So the distillery that we saw in the picture example, they have a biodigester on site, which all of their waste material goes into that biodigester to create a biogas that they then use to heat the stills. So creating a kind of nice closed loop for the heating there.
What was the distillery?
Knockneen Distillery.
Yeah, Paula won herself a bottle of Avallen.
Well done, Paula. And then finally, to ensure that this is a very basic one, but ensure that all installation meets minimum requirements. So you are minimizing your need to heat the distillery, heat the offices, heat the workspaces, and look towards kind of super insulated building methods. So those are just a few suggestions that you can look at to improve your CO2 footprint of both the raw material and the distillery. And then obviously you need to go and speak to Paul at ecoSPIRITS, get into an eco tote, have a chat with Sam for packaging, and get your bottles wrapped in Flexi-Hex, and then go see Roel and bring it all together in an LCA, which will really give you a great measurement tool, so you can see where you're at and you can see where those room for improvements are, which is what we're doing with Avallen.
Amazing.
So that is all I really have to say. Over to you, Steph.
That's fantastic, Tim. And I think it's such just coherent advice. Again, it's really hard. People feel like they can't retrofit sustainability. You're an established brand, an established bottle, an established category. But actually, I think we need to evolve mindset, and categories are fluid. Citizens, consumers, they don't necessarily just drink whiskey, just drink gin. People are flexible. It's all to do with the time of consumption when you're drinking that occasion. So, I'd be excited to see some of the bigger global players move away from monocrops and move towards some alternative raw materials. But no, I found that really exciting. We don't have many minutes left. We have 3. I believe there's a few more questions, but I may put you in touch directly with each other. I was wondering if any of you had questions for each other. You're kind of like this perfect puzzle, and if I fit you all together, you create this ecosystem that we all need to plug and play and work towards. Paul, do you have a question for Roel or Sam?
I was just impressed. I really learned a lot from both Roel and Sam, and Sam, loved the beauty of the design you've come up with and the solution. We're starting to tackle the issue of retail and how do you bring circular to the consumer experience. And, I'll connect with you offline, but, including e-commerce and things. So, but Roel, one question for you maybe is, in the planting, there's obviously, I really learned a lot tonight about the difference between grain and apple trees, for instance. Is there any meaningful carbon sequestration in the annual harvest cycle of grain, or is it minimal compared to the positive impact of trees, which obviously are permanent sink?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you said it yourself. So you sequester carbon in the bark and the and the branches, etc., and in the root system, and that doesn't happen in grain because the whole crop is lost. Yeah, I think you answered the question yourself. Yeah.
Oh, cereal.
Yeah, so if you just to expound on that, it's that low that short-term carbon, so that the plants will sequester carbon out of the atmosphere as they grow, but we consider that as soon as they're processed or consumed, they've released that carbon back into the atmosphere. So that's why we didn't include the carbon that is in the apple. So we took the CO2 from the entire process and then subtracted the carbon that is in the apples, because as soon as we process that, it's considered that it's been released back into the atmosphere.
Exactly.
There's a fantastic, I'm sure many of you have read it, but the Homo sapiens book, and it references this thing around agriculture, and did we tame agriculture or did agriculture tame us? But it's a very, very interesting read. Any other questions? Maybe Roel, do you have one back to Paul or Sam?
No, I'm just inspired by the fantastic solutions that are presented here. So no question, just a remark. Thanks for the inspiration.
Amazing. And Sam?
Yeah, quick question for you, Paul. I mean, an amazing product, an amazing business model. You briefly just touched on that, but just wondering, whether you have the further plans for kind of that sort of D2C market. It looks really applicable. Obviously, sort of a greater level, I suppose, of education, and sort of like it's almost like a new business model, but a very interesting space to work in.
So yeah, we've matured our solution for the on-premise market, obviously in the early years, and it works very well in that. We have a wonderful young engineering team here based in Singapore and Shanghai, and I've put them on the challenge first of bricks and mortar retail. Is it possible to bring circular to the grocery store, the bottle shop, et cetera, for good premium spirits. So we are working on that. And then the horizon for us is to look at the D2C market and say, what does circular look at? So stay tuned. There's news coming out about retail, meaning bricks and mortar retail soon. But the D2C market, I want to connect with you offline. It's a future area that we're really starting to think about. So yeah, absolutely.
Great
I
stuff.
have one request, Paul. So remember those photos you've seen where people have a champagne button in their house?
Press
Can
for.
you just make that happen so everyone can have a champagne button?
You want an Avallen button, don't you?
Yeah, Avallen, one champagne.
Tim has a bit of a champagne habit.
Fair enough.
I like
He did
champagne.
when he was on a corporate salary. I tell you, he would spend some pennies on those bubbles. I was lucky enough to drink them with him.
Yeah, I used to date the ambassador for a very, very nice champagne brand. So I think that's where my my love of champagne started.
Oh, with an EcoTote and a Smart Pour, you can have an Avallen button, Tim. It works. So.
Brilliant. Well, listen, time is up, but actually time is now. You've heard from 4 incredible panelists, of which 3 have solutions available to everyone in the drinks industry. Please do not hesitate to get in touch with them. We will be uploading a report which we'll publish on avallenspirits.com and we'll make available on social, and we will make sure to include everyone's contact details. For those of you that joined today, thank you for taking the time. For those of you watching this back, thank you for taking the time. And all that's left to really say is, Tim, do you want to do it? We've changed it now.
Oh, we haven't, what? I can't remember. You do it, because I don't know what you're going to do now.
Are you ready to be positive? That was you, but you have to say it at the same time. Ready?
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Are you ready
Are
to
you
be
ready
positive?
to be positive with some positivity? Right. Well, thank you. And everyone take care, be well, and please stay safe.
Thanks
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.
Merci, merci. Bye.
Bye.